Their woman's rebirth from the river. She was sinking in the river, tied up and alone, until a hand emerged from the waters and changed everything. Unjustly judged, she was thrown away like a burden. But when that Apache pulled her from the current, her fate took a new direction, and nobody could stop it. Watch until the end and discover how she was reborn from the waters. Subscribe now. The Parnaíba River flowed gently that September during the dry season, its clear water revealing the rounded stones in the shallow bed. The heat of the northeastern backlands punished the vegetation, but the waterway resisted, as stubborn as the inhabitants of the valley themselves. It was there, among the winding curves separating Piauí from Maranhão, that Joaquim found her. The body of a young woman floated among the water lilies, her simple cotton dress clinging to her brown skin, her arms forcefully tied behind her back, her eyes half closed as if still struggling not to leave this world. She was bound with sisal ropes and still breathing by miracle or stubbornness. Or Joaquim, a solitary fisherman born in the Quilombola community of Santa Teresa, observed the river like someone reading an ancient book. At 52, he knew every curve, every stone, every secret of those waters that divided states but united destinies. When he spotted the figure among the reeds, he dropped his fishing net without hesitation. He entered the water with an agility that time had not taken from him, pulled out the fishing knife strapped to his waist, and cut the bindings while holding the girl's head above the surface. "Easy, girl. Everything's all right now," he murmured, not knowing if she could hear him. He adjusted the thin body in his arms and followed the beaten dirt path that cut through the Caatinga vegetation to the village. He asked no questions. He knew the answers would come after life was guaranteed. In the community, the buzz began even before Joaquim reached Dona Zefa's house, the most respected healer in the region. The children were the first to spot the fisherman carrying the nearly lifeless body. "Aunt Zefa! Aunt Zefa! Mr. Joaquim is bringing a girl from the river," shouted little Tiago, only 6 years old, running ahead with bare feet raising dust. Dona Zefa was already waiting at the door of her mud house, her gaze serene but firm, her hands wrinkled by time, ready for the work that would come. "Bring her inside, man, quickly," she ordered, while moving aside the herbs hanging from the doorframe. "Sebastiana, boil water. Maria, bring clean cloths. Jurema, the herbs from the blue cabinet." Lying on the straw mat, the young woman barely breathed. They carefully removed her soaked clothes, revealing purple marks on her wrists and ankles. She was no more than 20 years old, her fair skin marked by the sun only on her arms and face, a sign of someone not born for heavy work. "Who would do such a barbarity?" asked Jurema, Dona Zefa's assistant and apprentice in her healing arts, while applying herbal compresses to the wounds. "The river will tell us when the time comes," replied the elder, placing her calloused hand on the stranger's forehead. "Now is the time to heal, not to ask." For 3 days, the young woman remained between consciousness and delirium. In the small community, the news spread like wind in the dry Caatinga. The women took turns caring for her. The children brought mandakaru and ipe flowers to decorate the room. The men reinforced the night patrols, sensing that whoever had tied up the girl might return to finish the job. On the morning of the 4th day, when the sun was still just a promise on the horizon, she opened her eyes completely for the first time. She met Dona Zefa's gaze, who was passing a damp cloth over her forehead. Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse from having drunk more water than she should. "You're in the Quilombo of Santa Teresa, girl. Joaquim found you in the river, almost joining the enchanted ones. What's your name?" The young woman hesitated, as if her own name was a painful memory. "Mayara," she finally answered. "Mayara Alves dos Santos." Dona Zefa nodded, offering a gourd with herbal tea. "Drink slowly, Mayara. Then tell us what happened if you wish. We're not in a hurry here." But the story came gradually, between silent tears and long pauses. Mayara was the stepdaughter of Dona Carmen, her father Severino's wife, a landowner in the region. After her father's death, she had been left under the guardianship of her stepmother and half-brother Rodolfo, a 30-year-old man known for his violent temperament. He tried to force me," she recounted, her eyes fixed on the mud wall. "When I resisted, he told his mother that I had provoked him, that I was the devil in the house, that I needed to be purified. The words came out broken by the pain of recent memory. They took me at dawn. They tied my arms and legs. They said the water would wash away my sin, that I would return clean, or not return at all. Donna Zephyr held the girl's hand firmly. Joachim, who was listening from the door, clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. Jurema let a silent tear fall while preparing more compresses. "No one will hurt you here, girl," assured the elder. "The river brought you to us for a reason. Now rest." But the rest would be brief. On the 6th day, when Mayara was already able to walk supported by Jurema around the yard of the house, the alert came from children playing at the community limits. A group was approaching on horseback, 3 men and a woman. In the lead, mounted on an imposing chestnut horse, came Donna Carmem, her rigid posture contrasting with her seemingly affable face. By her side, Rodolfo displayed a closed countenance, his hand never far from the weapon at his waist. The other 2 were farm henchmen, known in the region for doing the dirty work that their bosses didn't want to soil their hands with. The news spread quickly, and when the riders reached the entrance of the community, they already found a reception committee. Joachim was at the front, flanked by other fishermen and Quilombo workers. Donna Zephyr remained a few steps behind, her hands crossed over her chest, her gaze evaluating every movement of the visitors. "We've come to fetch my stepdaughter," announced Donna Carmem without dismounting. "We heard you found her. We're very worried. The poor thing suffers from hallucinations. She ran away from home during one of her episodes." Her voice was sweet, but her eyes remained as cold as stones at the bottom of the river. "The girl is well cared for," replied Joachim, without moving an inch. "And she told us a very different story about how she ended up in the river." Rodolfo advanced his horse, standing side by side with his mother. "Be careful what you say, old man. Are you calling my mother a liar?" The air became as dense as before a storm. The tension grew as the sun began to set, tinting the sky blood red over the Caatinga. "I'm not calling anyone a liar," replied Joachim with the calm of someone who has faced floods and droughts. "I'm just saying that the girl arrived here tied up like an animal, almost dead. And that has an explanation." Their gazes crossed like knives in the hot afternoon air. Donna Carmen maintained the artificial smile on her face, while her eyes scanned the set of simple houses, looking for Mayara. "I understand your concern, mister. What's your name again?" "Joachim. Joachim dos Santos, fisherman of this river for more than 40 years. "Well then, Mr. Joachim, I appreciate your care, but Mayara is my legal responsibility. The district judge signed the papers after my husband's death. If you don't hand her over, we'll return with the police." That's when Donna Zephyr stepped forward, her leather sandals marking the red dust of the ground. "The girl is not an object to be handed over, Donna Carmen. She's recovering from serious injuries. If you want to see her, you can get off that horse and enter as a visitor, without weapons and without threats." Rodolfo let out a dry laugh. "We don't take orders from quilombolas. We have rights over the girl and we will exercise them." His hand rested ostentatiously on the handle of his weapon. Little Tiago, who was watching everything hidden behind a manioc rack, felt a shiver run down his spine. At only 6 years old, the boy already recognized the smell of danger. An orphan welcomed by the community, he had developed a keen sensitivity to tensions and conflicts. Without anyone noticing, he silently moved away, running behind the houses until he reached where Mayara was being protected. Miss," he whispered breathlessly. "Your stepmother is here with armed men. They want to take you away." Mayara's eyes widened in panic. Jurema, who was changing the bandages on her wrists, placed her hand on her shoulder. "Calm down, nobody is going to take you from here against your will." But the tremor that ran through the young woman's body said more than any words. In the center of the village, the impasse continued. "We'll return tomorrow at noon," Donna Carmen finally announced. "With the sheriff and papers that prove our right. Prepare the girl." With a brusque movement, she turned her horse and left, followed by the other 3. The dust raised by the hooves took time to settle, as if the threat remained suspended in the air. That night, the community council gathered in the central yard around the fire that never completely went out, a symbol of the resistance that had kept the Quilombo alive for generations. Men and women formed a circle, each with the right to speak and vote. Joachim reported the encounter with the landowners, while Donna Zephyr shared what Mayara had told about the abuses she had suffered. "They will return," said Seu Antonio, the oldest of the councillors. "And when they return, they will have the law of paper on their side. Not the law of justice, but the one they buy with money." Many nodded. They knew well how the world worked beyond the borders of the Quilombo. "We can hide the girl," suggested Maria do Carmo, a young mother of 3 children. Take her to another community downriver. That would only delay the problem, replied Joachim. They would pursue her, and we would put our brothers from other lands at risk. A heavy silence fell over the group, broken only by the crackling of wood in the fire. It was then that Jurema, usually quiet in meetings as she was still an apprentice in the traditions, stood up. We have less than a day to decide, she said, her voice firmer than ever. But we are not alone in this fight. The river that brought Mayara to us is the same one that carries our prayers to the ancestors. We need their wisdom now. Her eyes shone, reflecting the flames. I propose a ritual of consultation with the enchanted ones. Let them show us the path when the sun rises. Donna Zephyr looked at her apprentice with a mixture of surprise and pride. She had taught well. Jurema is right, she agreed. Strength is not only in the muscles, but in the wisdom that comes before action. The council agreed, and soon the drum began to sound, calling the spirits of the ancestors. The voices united in ancient songs, while fragrant herbs were thrown into the fire. Outside the circle, watching everything with wide eyes, was Tiago. The boy felt each beat of the drum as if it were his own heart. When the adults focused on the ritual, he silently slipped away to the house where Mayara was. He found her sitting on the mat, hugging her own knees, her gaze lost in the small window that looked out toward the river. You don't need to be afraid, said the boy, entering without ceremony. Mr. Joachim is the bravest man here. He even faced a jaguar when he was younger. Mayara smiled, the first genuine smile since she arrived. And who are you, little brave one? I'm Tiago. I don't have a father or mother, but I have everyone here. He spoke with the simplicity of children without self-pity. The drum is playing for the enchanted ones to help you. He sat beside her on the mat, as if they were old friends. What enchanted ones are these? Asked Mayara, grateful for the distraction from her dark thoughts. They are the ancients who became part of the river, the earth, the wind, explained the boy, repeating what he had learned. They protect those who respect nature and punish those who do evil. His eyes shone with childish conviction. Mr. Joachim says it was they who took you near him that day. For a moment, Mayara allowed herself to believe in that magical possibility, that forces beyond understanding had guided her nearly lifeless body to the right hands. It was a comforting thought. In the early morning, when the drum finally fell silent, Jurema came to the house. She found Mayara and Tiago asleep side by side like siblings. Careful not to wake them, she covered both with a patchwork blanket and sat in the straw chair near the door. She would watch over their sleep until dawn. When the first rays of sun touched the Katinga, the decision had already been made. The council had deliberated throughout the night, guided by the visions received during the ritual. Donna Zephyr gathered everyone in the center of the village to announce, "The enchanted ones have spoken. We will not hand over the girl, nor will we flee like criminals. We will face the landowners with our truth and our unity." A murmur ran through the crowd, a mixture of apprehension and determination. Each has their role on this day, and we have much to prepare before noon. The tasks were distributed, and the community moved like a single organism. Some reinforced the entrance to the Quilombo, others prepared food that would give strength and energy. The children were sent to a safe place in the most distant house under the care of the elders. All except Tiago, who absolutely refused to move away from Mayara. "I am her guardian," he declared with the seriousness of an adult, drawing smiles even in that tense moment. Joachim spent the morning preparing his boat, checking every detail as if planning a long journey. Jurema collected specific herbs by the river, murmuring prayers as she gathered them with ritual care. Donna Zephyr remained in her house, mixing preparations in gourd bowls, her face concentrated like someone deciphering an ancient text. Around 10 o'clock, a messenger arrived, breathless. "They're coming! More people than yesterday. The sheriff is with them, and armed men." The news spread quickly and everyone took their positions. Mayara was taken to Donna Zephyr's house in the center of the village. Unlike the day before, she would not be hidden. She now wore clean clothes borrowed from the community women, a long cotton skirt and a simple white blouse. Her black hair, combed and braided by Jurema, framed her face, already less haggard. "I'm afraid," she confessed to Donna Zephyr as they waited. The elder held her hands between her own. "Fear is only a problem when it paralyzes us, child. Feel it, acknowledge it, but don't let it decide for you. In the distance, they could already hear the trampling of approaching horses. Tiago positioned himself beside Mayara, holding her hand with strength disproportionate to his size. Joachim and the other men formed a line at the entrance of the community, unarmed but firm. Behind them, the women carried gourds with river water and branches of sacred plants. The sun reached the highest point in the sky when the entourage finally arrived. At the front, Dona Carmen and Rodolfo, followed by Sheriff Queiroz, a man known for his venality, and 6 more henchmen armed with rifles. The confrontation seemed inevitable, the tension as palpable as the humidity before a great storm. Sheriff Queiroz dismounted first, adjusting his leather hat and the belt, where the revolver gleamed in the midday sun. He was a burly man, his face marked by old scars, his small eyes always calculating advantages. "In the name of the law, we've come to fetch the minor Mayara Alves dos Santos, who is illegally under the custody of this community," he announced with a voice trained to intimidate. "We have here the guardianship documents signed by the district judge." He waved the papers as if they were a weapon. Joachim stepped forward, his posture erect despite the years slightly curving his shoulders. "The girl is not a minor, Sheriff. She is 20 years old. And she is not under custody, she is under protection after having been found tied up in the river, nearly dead." The sheriff frowned, glancing sideways at Dona Carmen, who maintained an impassive countenance. "Even so, legal guardianship belongs to the stepmother until she is 21. As determined by the court after her father's death, you have no choice but to hand her over." It was then that Dona Zephyr emerged from the crowd, walking slowly until she stood face to face with the sheriff. Despite her advanced age and diminutive stature, she emanated a natural authority that made even the armed men shift uneasily. "We always have a choice, Sheriff Queiroz. Even the river chooses its path, going around stones when it cannot move them." Her voice was calm but reached everyone with clarity. "Before talking about papers and laws, I would like you to hear what happened to the girl. Why not ask her yourself?" A murmur of approval ran through the group of quilombolas. The sheriff hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. It was Rodolfo who intervened, dismounting with an abrupt movement. "Enough of this farce. The girl comes with us now, or these documents will be the least of your worries." His hand rested ostentatiously on the handle of his weapon. "I have enough men to raise this place today. Not even ashes will remain to tell the story." The threat hung in the air like dense smoke. The henchmen positioned themselves, hands close to their weapons. The quilombolas remained firm, forming a human barrier. For a moment it seemed that blood would stain the red earth of the quilombo. It was then that a clear and firm voice cut through the tension. "I'm here." Mayara emerged among the defenders, little Tiago still clinging to her hand like an extension of her own body. Dressed in white, her wrists still bandaged, showing the marks of the rope, she advanced until she stood a few meters from the visitors. "Do you want to take me by force, like the last time? Or will you tie me up again and throw me in the river to purify me?" Dona Carmen's face paled slightly, while Rodolfo's contorted into a mask of hatred. "Don't listen to her hallucinations, Sheriff," the stepmother quickly intervened. "I've already explained about her mental condition. That's why she ran away." "I didn't run away," Mayara retorted, her voice stronger now. "I was dragged at dawn by your son and 2 henchmen, tied up like an animal, and thrown into the river to die. All because I resisted when Rodolfo tried to abuse me." The shock of the direct accusation provoked an instant of absolute silence. Even the birds seemed to suspend their singing. The sheriff looked from Mayara to Dona Carmen, then to Rodolfo, whose face now alternated between pallor and flush. "They're lies," vociferated the young man. "She's always been problematic, making up stories, seducing married men in the region." "Enough!" Dona Zephyr cut him off. "We have witnesses. Her body tells the true story, Sheriff. The wounds from the ropes, the marks of hands on her neck, and we have something more." She made a gesture and Jurema stepped forward, bringing a small cloth bundle. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing pieces of sisal rope still stained with blood. "This is the rope that tied Mayara when Joachim found her, and if you look carefully, Sheriff, you'll see it bears the mark of the Alves farm, the same braiding they use for cattle." The sheriff approached, examining the ropes reluctantly. His face reflected the internal conflict, the loyalty bought by the landowners versus the irrefutable evidence before his eyes. Dona Carmen noticed the hesitation and changed tactics. Even if there was some excess on Rodolfo's part, That doesn't change the fact that I have legal guardianship of the girl. These are family matters that we will resolve at home." Her tone was now conciliatory, almost maternal. "Mayara, dear, let's go home. I promise nothing bad will happen. Rodolfo will stay in the city, away from you." She extended her hand in a rehearsed gesture of welcome. For a moment, all eyes turned to Mayara. The young woman seemed to evaluate her stepmother's words, her face an indecipherable mask. Tiago squeezed her hand harder, as if fearing she might accept the proposal. When she finally spoke, her voice came out low but clear. "My home is no longer there. It never really was. Since my father left, I've lived as a prisoner, not as a daughter." Donna Carmen let the mask of kindness fall. "You will come with us whether you want to or not. Sheriff, do your duty. Bring the girl and arrest anyone who resists." Sheriff Quiroz seemed increasingly uncomfortable, divided between the bribe received and the clearly unjust situation before his eyes. Maybe we should take this to the judge. Let him hear both sides," he began, buying time. "Coward!" exploded Rodolfo. "If you don't have the courage, I do." In a quick movement, he drew his weapon and pointed it at Mayara. "Come now, or I'll shoot." Chaos ensued. Women screamed, men moved to protect the young woman. Little Tiago, in an act of childish and desperate courage, let go of Mayara and ran forward, placing himself between her and the gun. "You won't hurt her," he shouted, his little arms extended as if he could stop a bullet. Time seemed to freeze. Rodolfo's expression oscillated between anger and shock at seeing the child defying him. It was in this critical moment that Joaquim acted. With the agility preserved from decades of fishing in the treacherous river, he launched himself against Rodolfo. There was a shot. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the clearing, frightening a flock of great kiskadis that took flight from nearby trees. For a terrible instant, no one moved. Then Rodolfo staggered backward, the weapon falling from his hand. He hadn't been hit. The shot had gone into the air during the struggle, but the shock of the confrontation was stamped on his face. Joaquim remained standing, breathless but unshaken. "Enough!" thundered the sheriff, finally taking a position. "Put away your weapons, all of you. This has become a bigger mess than it should have." He turned to Donna Carmen, who was watching the scene with a mixture of anger and calculation. "Ma'am, your papers may be in order, but we have serious accusations here. Attempted murder is not a family matter." The situation had changed. The henchman, sensing the sheriff's indecision, began to slowly retreat. Rodolfo, disarmed and exposed, cast furious glances at his mother, as if blaming her for the failure. Donna Carmen, however, was not a woman to give up easily. "All right, Sheriff, we'll retreat today. But this isn't over. We have rights over the girl and over the lands that remained when my husband passed. Lands that by chance border this Quilombo." Her gaze swept over the community with barely disguised contempt. "We'll return in 3 days with Judge Mendonça. He will not be so easily impressed by your stories. Prepare to hand over the girl and perhaps much more." The threat was clear. Judge Mendonça was known for favoring large landowners in land disputes. If he came, not only would Mayara be at risk, but the very existence of the Quilombo, which had been fighting for legal recognition of its territory for decades. 3 days, repeated Donna Carmen, mounting her horse again. "Take the time to say goodbye to the girl, and perhaps to your homes as well." With a final icy look, she turned the animal and left, followed by Rodolfo and the henchman. The sheriff hesitated, looking at Mayara and then at Donna Zefa. "I can't do much against the judge," he murmured, almost like an apology. "He's above me, but not above the truth," replied the elder. "Go, Sheriff, and reflect on which side of history you want to be on when it's told to your grandchildren." Disconcerted, the man mounted and followed the group, leaving behind him a cloud of dust and apprehension. When the visitors finally disappeared around the bend in the path, the tension gave way to momentary relief. Tiago ran back to Mayara, hugging her waist tightly. "Did you see? I protected you," he exclaimed, his face lit up with childish pride. Mayara knelt, embracing him with tears in her eyes. "Yes, I did, my little hero. It was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed." But the celebration was brief. The council met immediately, aware of the gravity of the threat. 3 days was not much time to prepare a defense against a corrupt judge who could not only take Mayara, but also threaten the community's land title. "We need a plan," declared Seu Antonio, the oldest counselor. "Something that not only protects the girl but secures our future." All eyes turned to Dona Zefa, who had remained silent, her eyes closed as if consulting voices that only she could hear. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of decision. "The river brought us Mayara, and the river will show us the way. We have 3 days to prepare not a defense, but a revelation." An invisible current of understanding seemed to run through those present. Jurema was the first to nod, followed by Joachim. One by one, the council members agreed, although not all fully understood the plan that was only being outlined in the elder's mind. The 3 days that followed were of intense activity in the Quilombo of Santa Teresa. Far from surrendering to fear, the residents worked with purpose and determination, following the plan developed by Dona Zefa and the council. Messengers were sent to neighboring communities, other Quilombos, indigenous villages, and small fishing settlements along the river. Joachim led a group of men on a special mission upriver, taking only the essentials and returning only on the night of the 2nd day, bringing with him an elderly man, whose name was revealed to few. The women prepared food that could be preserved, as if anticipating a period of scarcity. Jurema and her apprentices harvested specific herbs in the early morning hours, when dew still covered the leaves, murmuring ancient songs as they worked. At the center of everything was Mayara. The young woman had visibly changed in those days. The frightened look gave way to growing determination. She helped with the preparations, learned about the Quilombo's traditions, listened attentively to the stories of the elders, and at all times, she had the inseparable company of Tiago, who had seriously assumed the role of protector, even though he was just a child. "Why do they do all this for me?" she asked Joachim, on the afternoon of the 2nd day, while helping to weave fishing nets. The old fisherman continued his methodical work for a few moments before responding, "It's not just for you, girl. It's for all of us. When the river brings someone to our shore, it's because our stories are intertwined. Your fight is our fight." He pointed to the scar that marked his own arm. "See this? I got it when I escaped from the Mendonça farm 50 years ago. The same Mendonça, who is the father of the judge who will come tomorrow. Some surnames carry curses through time." His eyes, clouded by age but still perspicacious, met Mayara's. "But we can break these cycles. That's what we're trying to do." On the morning of the 3rd day, even before the sun had fully risen, everyone was already up. They wore their best clothes, not out of vanity, but out of respect for the importance of the moment. In the center of the yard, a large wooden table had been set up, covered with an impeccable white tablecloth. On it were gourds with river water, aromatic herbs, old photographs, and carefully preserved documents. Around the central square, residents from other communities began to arrive. Dozens, then hundreds of people who responded to the call for solidarity. It was approximately 10 o'clock when the dust on the road announced the arrival of the entourage. This time it was even larger than the previous ones. At the front was Judge Mendonça, a corpulent man in his 60s, his face permanently set in an expression of disdain. By his side, Dona Carmen and Rodolfo, followed by Sheriff Queiroz, visibly uncomfortable, and at least 10 armed men. Behind them, surprisingly, came journalists from the small-town newspaper and even a reporter from the state capital, alerted by anonymous messengers about the imminent conflict. The entourage stopped before the entrance to the Quilombo, clearly surprised by the assembled crowd. What they expected to be a quick and discreet action had been transformed into a public event. Judge Mendonça dismounted from his horse, adjusting his expensive clothes and the hat that protected him from the relentless sun. "We've come to deal with a legal matter," he announced with a voice trained for courtrooms. "The minor Mayara Alves dos Santos must return to the custody of her legal stepmother, as determined by the court. Additionally, there are territorial issues to be clarified, as part of these lands are under dispute." Dona Zefa stepped forward, leaning on a staff of carved wood. Unlike the other days, she wore a white turban and bead necklaces that proclaimed her position as guardian of the community's religious traditions. "Welcome, Judge Mendonça. We were expecting your visit." Her voice, though soft, carried an authority that made even the magistrate hesitate. "As you can see, we are not alone today. Many have come to witness what will happen here." The judge looked around, visibly annoyed by the presence of journalists and the crowd. This was not how he had planned to conduct the matter. "This changes nothing," he declared, regaining his composure. "The law is on the side of the Alves family." "The law, yes. But what about justice?" Donna Zephyr made a gesture, and Mayara stepped forward, still holding hands with Tiago. She wore a simple white cotton dress, her hair braided with colorful ribbons. Her wrists, still marked by the ropes, were purposely exposed. This young woman was found in the river, tied up and left to die. The ropes that bound her bear the mark of the Alves farm. "We have witnesses, fishermen's tales," interrupted Donna Carmen, advancing beside the judge. "The girl ran away during an episode. She's always been problematic since her father's death. And speaking of your late husband," Donna Zephyr made another gesture, and Joaquim approached, bringing by the hand the elderly man who had arrived 2 days before. He was a man of more than 80 years, thin and stooped, but with surprisingly lively eyes. "This is Sebastião Monteiro, former clerk of the Parnaíba Registry Office, retired for 15 years but with intact memory." The old clerk stepped forward, facing the judge without fear. "I recognize you, Dr. Mendonça. You were just a young lawyer when you falsified Severino Alves dos Santos's will. I was there. I saw when you replaced the original pages." A murmur ran through the crowd. The judge's face visibly paled, while Donna Carmen seemed to have been hit by a physical blow. "These are serious accusations," continued the clerk, his voice gaining firmness. "But I have proof. I made copies of the original will before the substitution. In it, Severino left half of his lands to his daughter Mayara, and the other half to his wife, Carmen. He also determined that the guardianship of his daughter, if she was still a minor at his death, would pass to his brother Francisco, not to the stepmother." The silence that followed was as dense as fog over the river. Jurema then stepped forward, bringing an old leather folder. "Here are the copies of the original will with notarized signature and date. And also," she continued, removing another document, "the true birth certificate of Mayara, proving that she has already turned 21. Not 20 as appears in the falsified documents. She is already legally an adult and free to decide her own destiny." Judge Mendonça looked at the documents, then at the clerk and finally at Donna Carmen, who was now visibly trembling. "This is a setup," shouted Rodolfo, advancing threateningly. "Are they going to believe a senile old man in quilombolas over our word?" It was then that Sheriff Quiroz, until then silent, stepped forward. "I believe them," he declared, to everyone's surprise. "And I have more to add." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "I received anonymous reports about other similar cases involving the Alves family. Young people who disappeared, land disputes mysteriously resolved. I never investigated thoroughly because—" He hesitated, embarrassed. "Because I was paid not to. But I can no longer carry this weight." Judge Mendonça now seemed completely destabilized. He looked at the sheriff, at the journalists eagerly noting every word, at the growing crowd around them. His plan was rapidly crumbling. "This proves nothing," he insisted, but his voice no longer carried the same conviction. It was then that little Tiago, who had remained silent beside Mayara, released her hand and advanced until he stood face to face with the judge. With the innocence and courage that only children possess, he raised his face and declared, "The river knows the truth. It was the river that brought Mayara to us, and the river never lies." His words, simple but profound, seemed to touch something fundamental in all those present. For a moment, only the sound of the water flowing in the distance could be heard. Donna Zephyr seized the moment to deliver the final blow. "Judge Mendonça, you came here to impose your law, but there is a law older than that of men, the law of truth, which flows like the river, always finding its way, no matter how much we try to dam it." She pointed to the central table, where the documents were displayed for all to see. "We are not asking for favors. We are demanding justice. The lands that your registry recorded as the exclusive property of the Alves family belong by law and by right, half to Mayara. And as for legal guardianship, it no longer exists, as the young woman has already reached the age of majority." She looked directly into the judge's eyes without fear. "You can insist on your version, of course. We can take this to higher courts. With these documents, these witnesses, and these journalists recording every word, Judge Mendonça knew when he was defeated. Years of manipulation and corruption had created a network of protection that now, suddenly, was breaking. He looked at Donna Carmen, who seemed to have aged 10 years in the last few minutes. "This isn't over," she murmured, more to herself than to others. Rodolfo, however, would not accept defeat so easily. In a quick movement, he drew his weapon again, pointing it not at Mayara this time, but at the old clerk. "Let's see if your evidence is worth anything when you're dead, old man," he shouted, his finger already on the trigger. Everything happened very quickly. Joaquim launched himself to protect the elderly man. Tiago screamed. Mayara ran. The sheriff drew his own weapon. But before anyone could fully react, a sound cut through the air. The whistle of an arrow that hit Rodolfo's hand, making him drop the weapon with a cry of pain. From the edge of the clearing, a group of Anase indigenous people, traditional allies of the Quilombo, emerged with bows still raised. Chief Poti, imposing at 60 years old, advanced calmly. "These lands," he declared in a loud voice for all to hear, "belonged to the Anase long before any paper existed. We respect the Quilombolas because they respect the river and the land, but we do not tolerate those who spill blood on sacred soil." The henchmen, realizing they were clearly at a numerical and moral disadvantage, began to retreat. Judge Mendonça, pale and defeated, looked one last time at the exposed documents, at the journalists, at the crowd. He knew that his reputation, built over decades of corruption, would not survive the day. "Let's go," he finally ordered. "This matter will be reconsidered." Donna Carmen tried to protest, but the judge's look silenced her. Rodolfo, holding his wounded hand, cast glances of pure hatred at everyone around. The entourage mounted again, departing in humiliated silence, escorted at a distance by the Anase indigenous people who would ensure they would not return, at least not that day. When they disappeared around the bend in the path, an explosion of joy ran through the crowd. Hugs, tears, songs and dances celebrated not only Mayara's permanence, but the victory of truth over decades of oppression. In the center of the celebration, Donna Zefa gathered the council, Mayara, Joaquim, and little Tiago. "Today's battle has been won," she declared with seriousness. "But the war is not over. They will return in other forms, with other papers, other strategies." Mayara nodded, understanding the depth of the challenge. "But we won't be alone," she replied, looking at the community around her. "The river united us for a reason." "And what will you do now, girl?" asked Joaquim. "With your lands, your freedom." Mayara looked at the horizon, then at Tiago, who held her hand with absolute confidence, then at Jurema, who had become a friend and mentor in the few days she had spent there. "I'm staying," she declared simply. "If you'll accept me, I want to learn the ways of the river, the traditions that have kept this community alive for generations. And I want to use the lands that belong to me to protect this place, to ensure that other people find here the shelter that I found." Donna Zefa smiled, her eyes shining with contained tears. "The river brought you for a reason, Mayara. And now we understand what it was." Months passed. Life in the Quilombo of Santa Teresa found a new rhythm. The lands that legally belonged to Mayara were officially recognized, creating a protective barrier against future invasions. Judge Mendonça resigned from his position after reports about his illegal activities. Donna Carmen and Rodolfo left the region, defeated but still bitter. Sheriff Queiroz, surprisingly, became an ally of the community, helping to formally register the Quilombola territory that had been fighting for legal recognition for decades. Mayara flourished in her new role. Under Jurema's guidance, she learned about medicinal plants, healing rituals, and the traditions that kept the connection with the ancestors alive. Her presence brought renewed energy to the community, attracting young people who had left for the city in search of opportunities. She established a small school by the riverside, where she taught children to read and write, but also to respect and understand nature. Tiago remained her inseparable companion, now no longer as a protector, but as her first student and enthusiastic assistant. Joaquim, the old fisherman who had found her on that fateful day, smiled to see her grow in wisdom and strength. "The river gives us what we need," he used to say, "even when we don't know we need it." On a golden afternoon in December, when the summer heat made the air shimmer above the Parnaíba, Mayara walked along the bank collecting flowers for a ritual of thanksgiving. She reached the exact spot where she had been found months before, a gentle curve of the river, where the waters formed a small backwater among ancient stones. She knelt on the damp sand, touching the water with reverence. "Thank you," she whispered. not just to the river but to all the forces that had conspired to transform her destiny. That's when she noticed, growing among the rocks, a small plant with white flowers she had never seen before. Jurema, who accompanied her, let out an exclamation of surprise. "It's the flower of life! I haven't seen it for decades. They say it only grows where someone has been reborn from the waters." Mayara carefully picked some flowers, feeling their subtle and persistent fragrance. In that same place where she had almost lost her life, a symbol of rebirth now sprouted. On the way back to the community, they found children playing, elders telling stories, young people building a new communal house. Life followed its course, like the river, circumventing obstacles, overcoming barriers, always finding its way to the sea. And in that small piece of Brazil, between the Caatinga and the river, a community celebrated not just its survival, but its ability to transform tragedy into rebirth, hatred into unity, fear into hope. Mayara looked at the horizon, where the sun began its slow descent, tinting the sky red and gold. In her arms, the white flowers that were born where she had almost died. In her heart, the certainty that the river always finds its way, and so do we. If you were moved by this journey of Mayara and the Quilombo of Santa Teresa, leave your like, comment on what touched your heart the most, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that, like the river, find their way through the stones of life to reach you.